Lovely. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Ashby. Welcome to another Exhibition Budgerigar Forum live stream, going out across YouTube and also the Exhibition Budgerigar Forum Facebook page. Tonight is another excellent interview that we're very pleased to be able to bring to you. We've got top fancier, judge, general council member, Graham Turner from Yorkshire. Good evening, Graham.
Good evening, John.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of this interview.
No, thank you very much. It's I say this to all our everyone I've been interviewing over these last few months. It's a big ask for you to give up your time so freely and willingly. So it's much appreciated. How are the birds?
They're doing very well at the moment, thanks, John. I've still got some pairs breeding, and they're doing very well at this time of year. So it's I find it a very good time to breed the birds. They seem to be more relaxed, more successful, less dead in shell. It's just a far better time to breed the birds.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the weather's so nice as well, isn't it?
It is.
It's traipsing up to the garden's a lot easier in the summer than it is
in the snow. The splashing through the ice.
Well, absolutely. So, I've got 101 questions, and we'll in some reasonable order, but I'll try and keep it on a sort of fair chronology, sort of taking you from the beginning of your time in the fancy through to today, and then obviously pick your brains on how you think we can move forward, and just generally try and extract from you key bits of information that other fanciers can learn from.
Sure, okay.
So how many years have you been in the hobby for now, please?
It's getting on for about 60 years now, John, which is a long time. And when I look back, it's flown by. I first started in the hobby when I was about 7 years old. My father kept pigeons and various types of birds and chickens and ducks and geese. And that's how I first started looking after birds. I think when I was probably about 7 or 8, I got a small aviary in the garden. That was just a general aviary with budgerigars, finches, a few canaries, a few quail. And I had that for a number of years. And the budgerigars were bred on a colony system. And because they bred so readily, they eventually just took over the shed and the flight. And that's how I got started in the hobby. And it was just a progression from that to where we are today.
Fantastic. And so you've got your sort of father to thank for this, have you?
I think I've got it. I think I thank him for that. Yes, yes, I do.
Brilliant. And so tell us about your setup as it is now. What I know for some people, this is obviously there was a bit in the BS magazine very recently. So
the current setup.
For those who haven't read it, could you just describe it as it is now, please?
Absolutely. The current setup I've got now consists of 2 bird rooms. The main bird room is approximately 30 foot by 10 foot by about 12 foot high to the eaves. And in there I have 2 large flights, floor to ceiling. And currently there's 45 breeding cages, plastic breeding cages, and 4 stock cages. And then I've got a bank of training cages for the babies. And that shed I replaced in 2005/6. The previous shed was the same size, but it was a pent roof. And I found it a little bit claustrophobic. So when I redesigned it, I wanted more area for the birds to enjoy. And the apex roofs giving me the height and the air circulation that I was looking for. The previous shed lasted me, I think I'd got it for about 35 years before it started to collapse. So I'd kept patching it up, re-roofing it, replacing bits and pieces, but it got to the stage where I really had to replace it. So it was at the club show in 2005, I think, approximately, when it was still at the racecourse, that there was a company there called Bransby Bunny Company who had a big stand there, and they displayed bird rooms, etc. And a friend at the time in the York Society, Fred Kennedy, had got one, I think, the year before. And I was very impressed with the build quality because it was insulated, lined, and it was substantial. So I went to them, and they designed it for me and built it and erected it. and it's still going very well, and it's doing me well. It's a good shed.
Excellent. Sorry, go on.
The second bird room is a recent addition, and that was done getting on for 2.5 years ago now, and that's a 14 by 8 shed, and that's purely dedicated to breeding the red eyes, the Lutinos and the albinos. And that's a different type of environment. That's again plastic. The cages were provided by Sam Wiles with internal nest boxes, and in there there's aluminium flights. But it is a completely different environment and a different feel to the previous shed. And it took the birds, even though it's only 6 feet away, the shed, when I transferred the Lutinos into there, it took them probably 18 months to really settle because it was a completely different environment to the previous bird room. And they didn't take to it very well, quite frankly. And I thought I'd made a mistake here. But slowly but surely they've got used to it, and I'm now breeding with the youngsters in there that were bred last year, and they're breeding very well. So it's now starting to reap dividends. But it's very easy to keep clean, and it's very well insulated. It's north facing, which I think was possibly the problem. My previous shed is west facing, and I think the fact that it was north facing, even though they're in an enclosed environment, I think the birds knew, and it did take them a long time to settle down. I think we can, no matter what environment we create inside the shed, somehow they still know what's going on outside. And I think that's part of the problem that we have with breeding in winter. So I've decided that bird room, I will only breed in the summer months, because breeding through the winter months in there was a nightmare. It was a disaster. Dead in shell, clear eggs, they just didn't like it at all. And since I split them up in February of this year, and I repaired them about 6 weeks ago, and fertility's been fantastic. Loads of chicks, loads of fertile eggs, and it's been a completely different experience.
It's really interesting you say that, because I completely agree that whatever and this is from my own experience, whatever you do inside your bird room, you can create subtropical climate, and even without windows, you could completely completely block out the outside world for the birds. But they know there's something in the air pressure or something, but they know when it's winter, and when it's not time to breed. I couldn't agree more with that. And equally with the sheds as well. The number of times I've heard people who have had a small shed that's been quite modest, and they bred birds for fun, they try and upgrade as they move through the hobby into something bigger and better, and the birds don't take to it. So it can be very disheartening if you spend thousands, you go from a small equivalent of a masonette for budgies into a great big mansion, and they don't like it. So what you're saying is the answer is just to persevere, and
it's just it's patience, and it's trying to understand what's going on. And it took me a long time to realize that the birds just weren't happy. And that's why I split them up, because it was a pointless exercise just to try and persevere breeding with them. So I put them back in the flights and just basically left them. And over a period of time, they settled down. One or two pairs did breed, so it did give me some youngsters, but not in the volume that I would have expected. I think over a 12-month period, I think I probably bred 20 birds over 12 months. The first year of breeding. That was probably off about 20 pairs. So I averaged 1 pair a bird, and that was a struggle, a real struggle to get that many. So those birds were left in a flight cage. They matured. They were used to the environment, and they're the birds that I'm now breeding with. And I'm now getting nests of 4, 5, and 6 without any problem. So I think it's just a case of patience.
And you didn't do anything different with the extraction system at all, so apart from reorientating the shed into north facing, it was pretty much as the previous one was?
Exactly the same. And I have an inline fan in there, which is used for extraction. That was the only thing, that they were fed the same food. The foodstuffs were the same water, the same conditions in terms of how they were looked after. So the management was the same. the only difference was the fact that it was relocated to a different position in the garden.
Bizarre. Oh, well, at least you've conquered it anyway. I could.
Well, I hope I have.
Well, if you're getting nests of 5 and 6, it sounds like you are. So
yeah, we're getting there.
Outstanding. And both your sheds are wooden construction. They're not.
Yes, they're both wooden construction, lined with plywood and PVC for easy cleaning. The floors are a lino-based product, so it's very easy to keep clean and wipe down. Hygiene is the #1 factor as far as I'm concerned, and it's got to be straightforward and easy to look after. The cages are all plastic, so they come up just like new once they've been used.
And with your lighting in your shed, Graham, what kind of lighting do you use? Because that's been quite topical recently online and in papers, etc.
Yeah, I about what would it be? Maybe 18 months, 2 years ago now. I changed the main shed from standard fluorescent tubing to LED battens, and they were the white light. There are two grades of light. There's a white light and a warm light. In the main bird room, it's quite a big area, so the lighting is quite bright. When I bred in there with the lutinos were always in the bottom cages. In other words, in the darkest area, because the lutinos do not like bright light, and you can suffer from eye problems with them. So when I designed the new shed, I put warm light battens in there. So the lighting is softer, more subdued, not as bright, and it seems to suit them okay.
Fantastic. Do you find in your shed as well, I had a conversation with someone the other day, and they were saying that with the lighting, they have more success in the cages that I think that they don't keep any red eyes. So they're all mainstream birds, but they're mainstream varieties. But they felt that their bank of middle cages, which got a fair bit of light but not too much, the birds bred much better in. Do you find that? Are there corners of your bird where whatever pairs you put they flourish as opposed to other cages? Is that something you found?
Yes, I would agree entirely with that. Yes, there is. And that's one reason why during the day the lights go off at particularly during the summer months, they go off from about 12 o'clock until 4 o'clock.
Okay.
So the lighting is very subdued then. I have got windows in both sheds, but the lighting is then quite subdued. And yes, the birds that are in the, if I can put it this way, the darker cages, the cages that have less lighting, do seem to do better. Which does surprise me, because you would think that they would like the light, but it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, so you often try and, I suppose I try and think along the lines of, how the birds would be in the wild. And I suppose if they're in a tree, it's going to be pretty shady in there, isn't it? They're going to look for the quiet, darkest places away from predators. So it is,
and that's why the nest boxes that I use in the main shed, the entrance hole actually faces into the cage, so that there's no direct light getting into the actual nest box itself, and they seem to do better. So I think the lighting does play a big part in it, but it also affects fertility, because I think you need lighting for at least 13 to 14 hours a day to generate fertility. I think any less than that, and the birds just aren't at the right level for breeding.
Sure. So in a breeding season, what time do your lights come on then? Are they on at sort of 6, 7, are they? Or
my lights come on at 7:30 and go off at 12, and then come back on at about 4, and then they go off at 10:30.
Okay, so that's a long summer's day as far as the birds are concerned.
It is, but bearing in mind there's a period during the day where they're off from 12 o'clock until 4 o'clock. And although there is light in the shed, it's subdued lighting. So they've still got the light, and they can still feed, and they can still fly about, but it's not full on. Sure. So any birds that want to take a rest, because in the wild, the birds during the heat of the day will take a rest. They will rest. And it's the same with the birds in the shed. And once the lights go back on again, the noise level is phenomenal, and the activity level is phenomenal. And the the hens come out the nest to feed and they go back and feed the chicks again. So it does make a difference, definitely.
Fantastic. It's obviously a system that works for you. So I know I have my own lights off for a couple of hours. Maybe I should think about extending that for a few more across the.
I think individually we have to find things that work for us, and what might work for me may not work for somebody else. And I think if it's working, leave it alone. Don't change it. If it's not working, then I think you've got to try different things to find out what the problem is, and hopefully you can get over it.
Absolutely. And with those SAM cages, I mean, they look so easy to clean. And have you got it on a system where you can just pull one out to clean it and put it back? You have them stacked?
No, they're stacked together on a base. But in terms of cleaning, I mean, they just clean up like new. They're sealed, so there's nowhere for mite to get in. Having said that, I have suffered a bit from red mite for the last month, but it's not getting into the crevices. It's actually on the surface of the cage, but it's easy to spot. But I think red mite this year seems to have been a particular problem.
And do you know how you got the red mite? I suppose you haven't been out much, because do you know how the red mite got in? Have you got any theory? Has it come in from a bird you brought in, or from the wild? Or
no, I think it's coming from the wild. About a month ago, I started to see an odd moth or two around, and I have got insect repellent pads in the shed which kill the moths, but I believe that the mite can come in on the moths. And it's only certain areas within the shed. It's actually one side of the shed that's suffered this year. Previous years, I've suffered very little from it. This year's been the worst I've known for a few years, and I think that's down to the heat and the humidity that we had a few weeks ago. And I use everything to try and get rid of it, but I use red mite products constantly throughout the year. I don't wait till I've got it before I start to treat it. I use it all the time, but even so, even using it, I still got some red mite this year.
What products are they? Do you mind sharing the names of those, please?
I tend to use AIL because I'll spray that on the birds once a week in the flights. I use Milban, which is ideal for painting around the nest boxes. And that's one thing I've missed this last month, is not being able to get hold of Milban. And I think that has made a huge difference. I've been using Milban for years and never had as many problems. I've not been able to use Milban for the last 2 months because I've not been able to find it. And
I think they've discontinued it, because I know someone else asked me a while ago where I got my tub from, and I had a look for it and I couldn't see it. So I'm interested to know whether they have discontinued it or not. But it is a good product, isn't it? Because unlike normal diatoms, if you sprinkle it about, it just drops off. But that product does stick. So
I think Milban's absolutely perfect. If I go back to last year, where I treated the cages and the nest boxes with Milban, there was virtually no red mite whatsoever. This year, because I've not been able to use it as much, well, at all, there's been an increase in red mite. I do understand that Milban will be back available early next year.
Oh, really? Oh, brilliant.
So that can't come quick enough for me, because I think it's a first-class product. But I use diatoms in the nest boxes as well. I use various pigeon products to try and get rid of it. If I have an area that's really bad, I will, as a last resort, use a spray product, which one or two people have used, which is called RDAP, which I find to be highly effective, but you have to be extremely careful when you're using it. But it does work. But failing that, what I do is I remove the nest box. I will completely put a new nest box on, and then take the old nest box away, thoroughly disinfect it, and then use it again somewhere else.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I must say that the AIL product is the bee's knees. I think that's a fantastic product as well. It's as you say, anything you can spray on the birds that isn't harmful to them is good news. So
no, I will also I do use that to spray the chicks in the nest box as well, and I find it to be first class. It's super product.
Outstanding. So obviously Lutinos are a big favourite of yours. How did you get into lutes? Was that something that did you like them from the get go, or did you kind of fall into them later on in the hobby?
Yes, probably later on. When I came back into the hobby because I had a break from about 2000 to 2005 for business reasons as much as anything else. When I came back, Ray Brown, who you probably are aware of,
Yeah.
was very big into Lutinos, and also Ray Steele, who are both local to me. And when I came back, I started with Lutinos from Ray Brown and also from Steve Cox in Southampton. And at one point, for probably 2 years, I had nothing but Lutinos in the main shed. And I probably had thick end of 150 to 200. And seeing a flock of birds all one colour, particularly Lutinos, they were stunning. They may not have been the best budgerigars in the world, but the colour was fantastic. But I soon realised that to improve the quality of the Lutinos, I really needed to put good quality normals to them. And so I think it was 2007, 2008, I purchased a couple of opaline dark green hens and a grey-green cock to put into the Lutinos with the intention of putting the feather onto them and improving the quality. That never happened, because what I did was, when I brought them back, I housed them together in quarantine, and the grey-green cock paired up to one of the hens. So I thought, well, okay, I'll put that together, and I'll try and get some more good quality normals to put into the Lutinos. And that's how the normals invaded the shed, if I can put it that way. That's how the normals started.
It was the other way round, was it? It wasn't the Lutes invading. It was
it was the normals. It was the normals. And gradually, over a period of time, I added more normals, and the normals started to take over the bird room to such an extent that, because the normals were better quality than the Lutinos, there was always a dilemma as to, well, do I use that cage to put a better pair of normals together, or do I put Lutinos down? And that's what made me decide on setting up a separate shed, because that way there was no conflict. I knew that red eyes were in that shed, anything else were normals in the other shed. And that's how the normals started, really. So they've gradually taken over, and the stud now consists, I would think, probably of 2/3 normals and 1/3 Lutinos and albinos.
Fantastic. And I completely agree. When you have got one variety, particularly the red eyes, that they are all in together, is an awesome sight. So I can see why people do want to specialise in them, and they are so attractive.
I think any collection of birds of one colour, whether it be light greens or sky blues, are impressive.
And obviously with I've seen some really good Lutes, particularly at the club show in the last few years. But have you seen many examples recently where they're so yellow that they've actually got that kind of orangey tinge in them? I always remember years ago the top Lutes had that. Is that something we've kind of lost, would you say, or is it still there in some people's birds?
I think it's still there to an extent, but I think because with the addition of normals to improve the quality of the Lutinos, we have lost and are in danger of losing the depth of colour. And that's why, for a long period of time, I simply paired Lutino to Lutino to maintain that colour. And you're quite right, the depth of colour is a deep buttercup yellow. I mean, the birds of Marjorie Kirby Mason years ago, they were absolutely almost golden. They were just a beautiful deep buttercup yellow. But as we've striven to improve the quality of Lutinos by putting normals into them, it does dilute the body colour. So when I do that now, and I have started using normals to improve the quality, the youngsters that are produced, if they are of a lesser, more like a lemony colour, I'll make sure that the following year they go to a good quality, a good coloured Lutino, to try and get that and maintain that quality. Because the beauty of the Lutino is the colour, and I believe that should come first. The quality of the bird is important, and obviously we're all striving to get the best quality bird that we can, but I just fear that we're losing the quality of the Lutino in terms of its colour. I think we need to try and be on guard to make sure that we maintain that quality.
Sure. And would you say that with a lot of varieties, do we as a hobby I know a good bird always, well, I suppose the adage, a good bird always trumps anything else, with variety content. But do you think there's more we could do as a hobby where we say, yeah, it's the best bird wins, but the best bird isn't always the biggest one. It's for instance with Lutinos, could we award more points in the judges' sort of mind for the colour? Is there something we could do in that respect to try and win back the variety in some of these birds?
I certainly agree with you on that. I think certainly as far as the specialist and rare varieties are concerned, I think we need to give more emphasis to the variety content than we actually do to the budgerigar. So, and I did see the presentation that Phil Rini did a little while ago, and I completely agree with Phil that, particularly if you take clay wings, for example, the first clay wings I saw back in the 70s they had beautiful white wings. They were almost like albinos. And the bird, I saw a bird at the club show, I think it was, and it was a white winged violet, and it was absolutely stunning. It had white wings with a violet body, and the wings were pure white, and it was stunning. Over the years, like anything else, we've tried to improve the content or the variety. We've tried to improve the budget by adding other normals into that, and I think we've affected the variety, and to such an extent now that the clay wings are almost like grey wings.
They are just grey wings, yeah.
Unfortunately, and I think we need to try and reverse that. And I would go back to putting more emphasis on the variety rather than the budgie in that case. We still want to strive to get the best quality budgie that we can, but we need to maintain that variety, because otherwise that variety will be lost.
Absolutely. I think there's definitely some discussion to be had there, isn't there?
There is, yes.
Most definitely. So I've got some questions from the Facebook page, the Budgerigar Society Progression Group. So I just say a big thank you to all the members who posted questions. So I can't credit everybody, but just a big thank you to all of them as a group. So the first question was, obviously you've always kept Lutinos as your kind of preferred specialist variety. Was there anything else before that that was perhaps more of a rare variety that you tried keeping, or
no?
Do you?
No, there was the only other variety that I do like are pieds, dominant pieds. So I do keep a large stud of dominant pieds, but other than the Lutinos, there's nothing else that I particularly specialise in. The stud consists of sky blues, light greens, grey greens, spangles. I've recently started with dilutes about a year, 18 months ago. So I've got quite a few dilutes now that I'm breeding, and they'll possibly be going into the Lutinos. So yes, there's a whole variety of birds, different varieties as well.
Outstanding. And obviously you enjoy showing. I assume being on the general council and having been in the birds for a long time and being a judge. What have been your sort of show bench highlights? Obviously not judging, but as an exhibitor.
Showing.
Real memorable ones that.
Well, the first highlight was, I suppose, as a junior when I first came into the hobby, and that was winning an award with a bird that I bred myself. I like showing, but it's not, as far as I'm concerned, it's not the be all and end all. If I'm successful and if I win something, then I'm very happy. But I don't get too disheartened or worried if I'm not winning major awards. I don't go in with any great expectations, and if I win something, then that's fantastic. But I'm not in it to particularly win awards. I prefer the breeding side of the hobby to the exhibition side, to be fair. But I realise that the exhibition side of the hobby is important, and I do support all the shows in Yorkshire. And the club show. So showing is an important part of it, but for me, it's not the be all and end all. The award that I won recently, which did give me a great deal of pleasure, was the best any age young bird at the Yorkshire Budgerigar Society show last year. And that was with a bird that a line I've been working on for the last 10 years. And it was an outstanding Spangle light green cock that won that. and he had everything. He was a fantastic bird, lovely size, shape and deportment, fantastic spangled spots, good colour. The only thing that let him down a little bit was the fact that he was one of those birds that his head was always had a few pin feathers in. And no matter how I prepared him, there was always a few there. It was a very difficult bird to get into prime condition. And he just got picked for best in show because of that reason. But he was an outstanding budgerigar. And that did give me a great deal of pleasure. And his brothers and sisters have developed well, and I've got those breeding now. So yes, that's the most recent one. And the other one, of course, was 2 or 3 years ago winning best Lutino opposite sex hen at the club show. Again with one of my own hens, which was actually bred from a Lutino cock paired to a pied hen, and the hen was actually masking pied, but it was a very nice hen, super hen, and she did very well. So I was very happy with that.
Outstanding. And have those birds bred well for you? Can I ask? Dare I ask?
The light green spangle, unfortunately, I lost about a month ago, which is unfortunate. He was paired up. He was paired to a very nice grey hen. The first round they had 2 chicks, a grey spangle and a light green spangle. Both take after the father, and I've just recently paired them up. They're very good. The second round they had 1 chick, a light green hen. The third round they had 4 chicks, and I went into the aviary one morning and he was fit as a fiddle, and to be honest, he'd never looked in better condition. He was feather perfect, and if there'd have been a show, he would have done very well because he didn't have a feather out of place. Unfortunately, in the afternoon, I went back in and he was dead on the floor. Not a mark on him. I suspect he'd either had a stroke or a fit or a heart attack. But I have got 7 youngsters from him, so his line continues, and I've still got his brothers and sisters breeding. So he will go on, but that's what happens, unfortunately, with livestock.
Yeah, there are a lot of disappointments along the way, aren't there?
There are.
Regrettably. Just a question on getting birds into condition. Is there any sort of product or anything you give your birds to get the cock birds really bouncing prior to pairing up? Have you got any little secrets you can share with us?
Not really. I just tend to feed them a standard seed mix. I use primarily Hayes Clubman range, seed from their Clubman range. So they get a variety of seeds and mixtures. One thing I do feed is a supplement, a mineral supplement and a vitamin supplement twice a month from Fraser's, which is called Oasis, which I give twice a month. Other than that, the birds are fed just on water I put iodine drops into the water every day, only 2 drops per litre, so it's a very, very small amount of that. But I do believe that has helped this year in terms of fertility. Since I've been using it, I found fertility has increased. So I will continue to use that. But no, other than that, I feed a general seed mix. They get a tonic seed, Hayes tonic seed. They get a good quality grit. There's a bit of a debate regarding grit, but I don't believe the birds need it to digest the food, but I do believe that they pick up salts and minerals from it. So that's why I feed a grit. I feed a product called Mana Plus, which I get from Osmond's, which is sort of a mineral supplement, vitamin supplement. But other than that, that's pretty much it. I do feed a protein mix, which consists of Fraser form from Fraser's. They also get a mixture of wild bird seeds from Marriages. Now that's got a whole range of different seeds in, sunflower seeds, a whole variety of seeds, and it just gives them just a bit extra really. But I do feed I feed seeds from Versilaga because I believe that where the seeds are grown in different areas of the world, there's different vitamins and minerals in the soil. So they do get a fair variety of different seeds from different areas. But other than that, there's nothing special.
Is that all year round, Graham, or is that
That's all year round. It's all year round. Yes.
And do you do a soft food as well? I know it's the favourite question for.
No, not really. No, there's a new product that I'm trying, and I'll reserve judgment on that yet. It's not a soft food. It's not an additive. It's a supplement really, but I won't mention that just yet because I'm not sure how much of an effect it has.
Sure.
But I'm always, I think, like everybody else, we're always looking for that magic product. And I'm not sure really that it exists. I think we need to just feed a well-balanced general diet that contains as many vitamins and minerals that we can find, really.
Absolutely. So, and I get the impression you're the kind of person that, I mean, obviously you're involved at all levels of the fan scene, right from the top, but obviously further down into area and local club. How important is the social side of the hobby to you? Because all I would say is that the more I buy into it, the more I get out of the hobby. I assume that's the same for you.
Oh, I would totally agree. I think the social side of the hobby is vital, and I think that's one thing that's sadly missed during this pandemic. Is the inability of everybody to get together and just have a chat. And one thing I have really missed this year are the aviary visits, both people coming to see me and going to see other people. And some of the trips that we've had in the past abroad to Holland and Belgium and Germany have been fantastic. And it's just a good way to make relationships and learn off other people, because even though I've been keeping birds for almost 60 years, I don't think you ever stop learning. There's always something new that somebody's trying, or a product that they're using that might work. I'm not saying just change to every product that you hear about, but if people find it successful, then give it a try if you wish. But it's just the social interaction and it's the banter that you get from different people that I miss. So I think it's unfortunate, but it's where we are at the moment.
Would you recommend to sort of beginners and novices as they are now, and perhaps people in the hobby who don't get out as much, would you recommend they go to the club show and visit shows and really get out there? It's as a way to get ahead, because I think it's quite daunting for people. I always remember the first year I went to the club show. I went up there on my own. I didn't really know anybody. Would you suggest really that's what you've got to do? I think sort of throw yourself into it to meet people and to put yourself out there.
I think it's absolutely vital for somebody that's new coming into the hobby. And I know at the moment it's very difficult to do that, but once things settle down, even before people buy the shed, if they're thinking of coming into the hobby, then I think it's vital that they go around and visit as many people as possible to get different ideas about the design of the bird room, the layout, because everybody's got different views and different ideas. But if you take a bit from everybody and make your own plan, then I think that's very helpful. But I think it's vital that they go around and learn about the different types of birds that are available, the different methods of feeding, the different types of the way that people look after the birds. I think it's absolutely essential. That's even before they actually go and buy a bird. I had a couple came to see me this weekend just gone, and they're currently breeding rabbits and thinking of moving into budgerigars. And they came to have a look round and get some ideas and bits and pieces. And that's what I would encourage any beginner to do. In fact, I would encourage anybody to do it at whatever level. Go to different aviaries, look and learn, and just take ideas from people and take suggestions from people and adapt it to your own way of working. I think it's absolutely vital. I think buying birds blind, unless you know what you're doing, is a route to disaster. And when I have beginners that contact me for birds, unless they actually come and see me, I won't supply them with a bird, because they need to come and actually have a look at the bird, make sure it's what they want, and they need the experience. If you're experienced and you know the people that you're buying the birds off, then that's a different matter. But when you're new into the hobby, you have to get off your backside, go to people's aviaries, look at the birds, and that's the best way to do it.
It's interesting. I'm glad that lady with the rabbits found her way to you. I've got a feeling that someone was on the exhibition Budgeriggar forum this week asking.
That's
I know
correct.
she was in your area and she got
right.
some advice from the forum. So I'm
That's
glad
right.
that she made it to yours anyway. A responsible fancier who will and helped her out, which is good news. And the other thing is I've never found, and I'm sure you'll agree, that most people are so welcoming in the hobby. You sort of turn up and you know they really look after you with tea and biscuits and tea in some cases.
Absolutely, yeah, most definitely.
So there's nothing to be frightened of.
No.
So let's get on to the General Council. So how did it feel when you got the call to go onto the GC? Were you thrilled? And
my first view was I was surprised because obviously I didn't expect to be on the council. So the first feeling was one of surprise, and I suppose the second feeling was one of excitement because obviously it's something that I wanted to be part of. Didn't expect to get on until the next election, possibly. So I really wasn't prepared for it because it came out of the blue, but I was prepared to embrace it and take the opportunity.
Fantastic. And is it how you were expecting it to be? Is it or is it very different?
It's very different at the moment because obviously we can't meet face to face, and that does take away the personal relationships and the personal connections that you get. So it's all done by Zoom, and whilst Zoom is okay, it's far from ideal because you can't beat a face-to-face discussion. So it's been difficult from that point of view, but it's been rewarding as well. So it's something that I'm enjoying.
Good. And I suppose if it allows the General Council, the Zoom and other sort of conferencing software allows the General Council to meet with more regularity and a much less expense as well. I suppose if you
absolutely,
it's a whole weekend, isn't it? I imagine.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it does allow decisions to be taken quicker than would normally otherwise be the case, because with maybe 4 meetings a year, the decision-making process can be slowed down. And I think that's one of the frustrations that a lot of people feel within the hobby, that things take a long time to actually get discussed and progressed. Zoom does allow a quicker decision-making process, even though it's not ideal. And I do believe it's something that should have happened some considerable time ago. But we are where we are now, which is good. But I can't wait to get back to proper face-to-face meetings. I think moving forward, once the pandemic is at a position where we can meet again, it would make sense to have a combination of Zoom meetings and face-to-face meetings.
No, I agree. That would seem to make a lot of sense. And I get what you're saying as well about, I know through work myself, you know, once you get past 5 or 6 people in a meeting, if it's a big presentation, you can have 50, 60, 100, 200 listening in. But when you've got people trying to participate in a conversation, I agree. Once you get to past 5, 6, 7 people, it's probably a bit too many really at that point. Yes. So it does make it difficult. Another question from the progression group. As a breeder member of the BS General Council, what could be done differently and better to encourage beginners and newcomers to the hobby and then to show?
That's a very difficult question. One of the things I would like to see discontinued is the joining fee. I think it's currently £7.50 to join the BS. I don't understand the reason for that. I think when people join the hobby, it can be expensive to start up, and I think we could do away or look to do away with the joining fee. That's certainly something that I will be pushing for. Sorry, what was the rest of the question, John?
So what can be done differently and better to encourage beginners and newcomers to the hobby, and then obviously critically to show?
I think to try and encourage people to the hobby, I think the society needs to embrace multimedia to a very large extent. Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever social media platforms are available to get the message out to people, because that's what the younger generation tend to use now to interact, and I think we need to be part of that. But I think once we do get members or people wanting to join the society, I think we need to, and I think we need to allocate almost like a mentor to them to give them help and advice and to steer them through and guide them through the start in the hobby. That is a process I do believe that has been started, and I hope that will continue. In terms of getting people to show, again, all we can do is encourage and help them, and again that comes down to people mentoring them and getting them involved in the show side of the hobby. The show side of the hobby is not for everybody, and it's the Budgerigar Society is the Budgerigar Society. It needs to cater for every aspect of the hobby, whether that be somebody in the back garden keeping a few budgerigars that wants a loose connection with the society, or whether it be an exhibitor. So it has to cover every area of the keeping and breeding of budgerigars. And that's the way forward in terms of then hopefully those people that start with a few birds in the back garden, which is what I did when I first started, will eventually progress to the exhibition side of the hobby. But it has to be all encompassing.
So I think you hit the nail on the head, and for me as well, I can remember years ago when my mum and I, when we first got into the birds and we started breeding, the thrill, and I've spoken to countless other people where they were all look back and reminisce and say, back in the old days, it was 6 or 7 eggs, most of them were full, most of them hatched, there were never any feeding problems. And I think that's what really secured people in the hobby, that kind of bound them to it, was that they found it so easy to breed birds. Mm-hmm. And obviously when you get into the exhibition birds, they're just more problematic to breed, aren't they?
They are, yes. They're more of a challenge, yes.
They are a challenge. So is it a step too far trying to get people to leap from nothing to exhibition birds? Should we be trying to transition them more into kind of birds, the kind of miniatures, the colour budgies, and then lead them in? Is that the way forward, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. The miniatures are not everybody's cup of tea, but they're an ideal way of beginners getting into the hobby because they are finer feathered, they breed better. If I look back at the way I used to breed when I first started on the colony system, that's how they were. They bred like mice. All I needed to do was put an S box in and bingo, you've got half a dozen chicks. Now the birds have got bigger, buffier, heavier feathered. The frame has changed. They are definitely more of a challenge. And I think to expect beginners to breed that type of bird is completely unrealistic. And I think the beginners that come in and try and breed that type of bird possibly don't last long because they get frustrated with the hobby and leave. And that's why, again, a mentor would help them to try and find the right type of bird. To get them, first of all, they have to start breeding birds. That's the first point. If you can't breed budgerigars, then there is no hobby because that's what it's all about. So the first thing they need to do is know how to breed budgerigars. And it doesn't really matter what level they are, whether it's a budgerigar of colour or if I can refer to it as a pet type bird. They're the sort of birds that they should be breeding and learning how to manage the birds. And then over a period of time, slowly but surely, if they wish, move on to the exhibition type birds once they know what they're doing. But to expect them to come straight into that side of the hobby is unrealistic. And
the other thing is there's a huge cost element, I've been in the hobby a long time now, and I think over many years, or the last 10 years, all I've done is spend money on my shed. It's just been a gradual progression to I have to be careful how loud I say this because my wife's at home and she'll suddenly come bursting in the door behind me and start throttling me. But it's been a constant progression of spend. And when I tot up how much I've spent, and obviously from what you've said, you've done the same, if not much more. The initial outlays is a fortune, isn't it? Whereas if you're getting people starting at a smaller scale, it's affordable, isn't it? And I just kind of think with the exhibition birds to do it well, you know, if you tell someone they need many thousands, it's going to be very off-putting.
It can be daunting in terms of the cost of starting up, but it needn't be. It doesn't have to be. People can buy a second-hand shed. People can buy second-hand cages. It depends what their level of expectation is. I mean, when I started in the hobby, I had quite a large, over a period of time, I had quite a large aviary with an outside aviary. A friend of mine, who at the time was probably, I don't know, 15 or 16, decided to start with budgerigars. He only had a very small back garden. He had a coal house. And he actually started breeding budgerigars in a coal house. And he did very well. He bred loads of birds. Didn't stay in the hobby a long time, but the birds of that would have bred almost anywhere. I've known people breed birds in their back bedroom. It really does depend on the individual as to how much they want to spend to set up initially, but it need not be expensive. It need not cost a fortune. If somebody wants to start off with a 6x3 shed and half a dozen cages, they could probably do that for a few £100s. But the problem is that with people looking at Facebook and they see all these fantastic super duper setups and the super duper birds, they want to run before they can walk, and they all think that that's what I want. Well, they don't realise that that's probably taken a fancy of 20 or 30 years to get to that stage, and that's what they need to understand. And if they have deep pockets and they want to come in and spend thousands of pounds, that's entirely up to them. I have no problem with people doing that, but I don't think they'll last long in the hobby.
I think you know, across some of these interviews that we've done on the EBF for the last few months, that's been quite a consistent message, is that the patient element to it, and also the fact that I know everyone wants instant gratification and instant success, but this isn't perhaps the hobby for them, or it's how we sell the hobby perhaps and how we market it, is that there is success there, but I don't know whether we kid people or manage their expectations better, but I think we do have to make people aware that it's hard. It's hard to. I think some people can win quickly with good bolting birds, but sustaining that when you're not that experienced is really difficult, isn't it?
It is. It's a long-term hobby, and it's not for everybody. And I do believe that that's why some people that come into the hobby don't realise the amount of commitment that you have to put into the birds. It's not like golf, where you can dip in and out of it. You can play golf once or twice a week and then not play for 6 months. Keeping any livestock is a 7-day a week, 365 days a year commitment. And sometimes people forego holidays because they can't find people to look after the birds and the livestock. And I think that's what some beginners can't deal with for a variety of reasons. Family reasons. Not every fanciers family are committed to the birds, so that can cause problems. Going on holiday. So I think that's why some beginners come into the hobby and then realise that they really can't give the commitment to the hobby and then drop out. Now, they may well come back in 10, 15 years' time, which does happen an awful lot. They come back in later life. But I think we need to understand that some of the beginners, we will lose some, and that's not a fault of the hobby. That's something that the hobby has no control over, because that's down to their own personal circumstances. I think all we can do is, when they come back, is encourage them back again.
Yeah, it's just setting. You know, we all know that once people get the bug, it's generally in their head, isn't it? Forever.
It is.
It's just lighting that initial flame. So another question from the progression group. What's the one most important thing you hope to promote and put forward whilst on the General Council to advance the hobby for the future, other than the addition of plastic trespass show cages? So show cages aside, what's the big thing what's the big thing you're really going to push for in the next few years on the GC?
Well, I think we really have to, and I touched on this earlier, we have to embrace social media in a bigger way than we currently are. This type of thing is absolutely perfect. And this is what we should be doing more of. We need to be getting the hobby out to a wider range, or as a wider range of people as possible, so that in the event that they see the hobby, they think, oh, I quite like that. I like those birds. So posting videos on YouTube. I'd like to see the club show go live on Facebook. I'd like to see online interviews with the judges at the club show. I'd like to see somebody going around. I'd like a multimedia person involved with the BS whose job is purely to develop the multimedia side. Sorry, not the multimedia side, the social media side of the hobby, and try and get that out to a wider range of members or potential members as possible. I think what Matt Ackers has done over the last few years has been fantastic, but I think we need to grow that and develop that and get out to as many people as we possibly can. It's a wonderful hobby, but we are very good at preaching to the converted, but we need to get to a wider audience. I would like to see the BS magazine published or obtainable from somewhere like WH Smith. I'd like to see it go digital, so that people can actually be exposed to the hobby. I think that's mainly the problem these days. If you take places like Pets at Home, they don't have birds in their premises anymore. So I think there's possibly a lot of relationships that could be established with people like Pets at Home, where perhaps fanciers from the local area could take a display of birds in there every now and again and explain to people who come into the shop what the birds are. Because I still get people now ringing me up for a pet budgerigar, but the pet budgerigar almost used to be a household product. There also used to be one in every home. Now it's very unusual, and I think it's because people aren't exposed to the hobby, and that's what we need to try and address.
Well, the scary thing with that was I had a local journalist come and see me. I invited them into my place a couple of years ago just to get a bit of sort of coverage locally, and just trying to, was where I am in Watford. There's no other fanciers, so I was just trying to win a friend close by, trying to encourage someone in. And when the journalist came in, he's probably about sort of 25, 26, just ahead of coming across. He said, "Oh, I've been passed this by the editor, and I'd like to come and speak with you." And his question to me was, "What's a budgerigar?"
Oh wow!
And I honestly thought he was taking the mickey, but yeah, after 30 seconds, I think the penny dropped, and I realised he didn't know what a budgerigar was. And wow. He wasn't 12. He was 25, 26. He should. You think everyone knows what a budgie is, but he had no idea. Which I found quite scary.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not limited just to the budgerigar hobby. It's all livestock. Even the rabbit side, the rabbit fancy, or the tropical fish fancy. There aren't the people keeping them that there used to be, and that's just partly cultural. That's because things have changed over the years. But when I was growing up, we used to go to Leeds Market, and in Leeds Market there was a whole area devoted to animals, and we used to see animals from all over the world and birds from all over the world. Now, I'm glad a lot of that's finished, because obviously it took our animals from the wild and birds from the wild. And I'm glad that stopped, because we're now breeding our own. But there isn't that exposure that there used to be to livestock in the way that it was when I was a young lad. And I think that's the difference. And we have to somehow get that message across to younger people and people in general, because obviously a lot of people are looking for hobbies these days, and we need to introduce them to the hobby of budgerigar breeding, because it's a fantastic hobby, but we need to get more people involved.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we know that so many, and this is why I refuse to admit defeat on the fact, that we're going to see the hobby slump even further over the next few years, because we know that so many people have started keeping chickens in the last 5 or 10 years. Their numbers have really burgeoned. So yes, you get a product from the chicken, but you don't really get a social side or a competitive side. So if people are keeping chickens and we can offer more, I still think we're not done as a hobby. I think we can really grow it. And you're right, people seem to be looking for hobbies, don't they? They want something that's perhaps not always computer based that they can really throw themselves into. So
absolutely, I think it's a fantastic hobby, and you're right to allude to the competitive side of the hobby. A lot of people are looking for a competitive type of hobby, and what's better than what we're doing? It's a fantastic competitive hobby. And if you're purely interested in breeding, you can devote your time to that. But if you want the competition, then there is an element of competition as well.
Well, it is nice you can do the hobby at so many different levels, isn't it? It's not like you've got to do budgies, but you can only do it at exhibition levels. So you're quite right. You can keep birds and never speak to anyone again, can't you? Which is
absolutely, and that's one thing I would like to see introduced is a tiered membership for that very reason. That people can choose what level of involvement they have in the hobby, either as a pet breeder, if you like to put it that way, or even an intermediate step, or a full exhibition exhibitor where they've got full access to everything and they pay an appropriate fee for that. So I think there's definitely a way forward in terms of different levels within the hobby. And I think that's something that will be looked at.
Well, I think the General Council are finally looking at that, aren't they? I think it's a bit late in the day, if I'm honest, without being too critical. But yeah, they seem to be picking up on that, which is good news. So well done to all the General Council for that. So with the fancy, do you think we have too many shows each year? Would it be better if we had fewer? Would that mean more support at those shows, more birds in classes, and which would equate to better shows? Or have we got the right number, do you think, at the present?
The short answer is yes, we have too many shows. And we have too many shows. We have too many shows in a shorter period. The shows generally run between beginning of July and probably mid-September with a club show. And the problem is that all those shows are trying to be squeezed into such a short period of time that people can't support all the shows because of family pressures and other things, holidays and everything else. So I think there's definitely too many shows. I think the show season needs to be extended. I would like to see the club show put back to possibly November. I think the whole breeding season and the show season needs to be adjusted. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to try and revamp the whole show season. And if I look back to when I first started showing, we would have shows every other week. So we always had a week's break in between the shows in the Yorkshire area. Now that allowed us either to have a week off or it allowed us to go to another area and show in another area. That very rarely happens now because the members are so keen to support the local shows that that's all they're able to do. So I think, yes, the short answer is yes, there's too many shows.
And obviously we've touched on the fact that breeding budgies sort of June, July, August, September is a good time to be breeding them, particularly now. Do we really, as a hobby, do we really want to go back to scratch and say, well, show of hands, when does everyone prefer to breed? And then when we got that answer, then fix the show season. Because to me, that would be the logical step. I know that would perhaps really upset the apple cart for some people, but is that what perhaps we need to do? Just throwing that one out there.
Yes, I mean, my as I've already mentioned, that I'm breeding better now than I have done throughout the course of the rest of the year. So my and next year I will be breeding from sort of March through to August, September time, because that's the natural time that the birds want to breed. The show season should then follow around that. We've got it the wrong way around. We're breeding around the show season. It should be the other way around. The show season should be working around the breeding season. So we need to get the birds breeding because that will then help people stay in the hobby because they're breeding more birds. If you get a beginner coming to the hobby and they're trying to breed birds over November, December, January, February, it's bad enough for an experienced fancier to do that. And I think that's why a lot of them get disillusioned and perhaps leave the hobby because it's too difficult. Plus, it's costly. You have to put heating on, lighting on, and it's just not the right time to do it. And I would like to see a complete shift in the breeding and the showing season.
Brilliant. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, the other nice thing about the hobby is that it's so, it's very traditional, isn't it? And the way we do things is, hasn't changed for a long time. And, I think we all really enjoy that kind of part of it. But, and I think perhaps that makes it difficult for us to try and change the way we do stuff radically, because we are all these habits and these traditions are so well entrenched, aren't they?
That's right. I think it will have to be a gradual process.
And I get that it's kind of off-putting for people, where if people if they're listening to this and thinking we do really want to turn everything on its head, but it's for the right reasons, though, isn't it? That we're thinking about it. So with the European feather, are you kind of for that or against it? The kind of bigger extreme birds. What's your position on that, Graham?
I think they've got a place. It's certainly not on the show bench, but they have got a place in the breeding room, definitely. And I am using some of these. I wouldn't call them extreme. I would call them heavily feathered, buff feathered birds. And there is a place for them, certainly. But you certainly don't want to be overrun with them. But they have got their uses. It's a bit like a jigsaw. There's all so many different elements to make up the complete budgerigar that we're looking at. Feather obviously is a major part of that, but we don't want to be double buffing birds, because all we end up with is a bag of feathers. And they should be nowhere near the show bench. They're stock birds and they should be used for that purpose. And they should be being paired to lesser feathered birds to provide a nice balanced show bird. So there is a place for them, but it's definitely not on the show bench.
Would you say that where the judges are not being, or I can't heap this all on the judges, but just as a hobby, have we been a bit slow to kind of put the brakes on allowing people to bring those birds to shows? Would you say they're not being penalised heavily enough to discourage people from bringing them to shows?
I would, because the first rule is that condition is essential, and those big buff feathered birds tend not to be in the best condition, but they look very powerful, and people look at them and think, wow, that's a fantastic budgerigar, but fail to look at the detail. So they might have flights missing, they may have tails missing. They're just not in the right condition to be on the show bench. We should be looking for a nice, stylish, balanced, well-proportioned bird in good feather, in good condition, that's complete. And that's the sort of bird that should be winning. It should be a show bird. It should be the bird like Les Martin, the grey-green. That was, to me, the absolutely ideal show bird. It was in good condition, good feather. It was magnificent. And that's the bird that, when I'm looking at a bird, that's the bird I've got in my head as being probably as close to the ideal as possible. To my eyes, it was fantastic.
That was the best bird you've seen, would you say?
I would say that's the best bird I've ever seen.
And amazingly, that was quite a few years ago now. What was that? Was that 2014?
Was it? It's a number of years ago now. And to be honest, I've seen very few birds that would even today beat that. It was outstanding.
Well, people say the hobby moves on every 10 years, but everyone who saw that bird in the main says to me that was the best budgie, and it hasn't been eclipsed. So we've got bigger, buffier birds, more powerful birds, but it wasn't as good as that, which I always think, which is quite interesting when people say that to me. It's
well, that to me was a true show bird. It had everything. It had style, it had power. It was in beautiful condition. It was complete. And that bird, in my view, would still win today. It was fantastic. I've seen very little to beat that. Possibly with the exception of the light green that Adi had at the club show, which I thought was a fantastic budgerigar.
Yeah, that wasn't too shabby either, I must
admit. No, it was superb. But in terms of the big buff birds, there's no place on the show bench for them. They should be in the stock cage breeding. And that's down to the judges to make that decision.
without doubt, breeders, if you've got one and it's good, you're as an exhibitor, you're going to want to put it in, aren't you? People
of course you are.
Still, so it's up to the judges to penalise them. So when you go on to the General Council, I'm fascinated because I know it's not a secret society, but obviously it's the top of the hobby, and we don't, we don't know, none of us can kind of listen into the Zoom to the conversation at all. Are there any particular rules or conventions that you have to agree to or abide by when you sign up? And I know it's not the Masons where you do a funny handshake or anything on the GC, but or unless you tell me you do.
I'm not aware of any.
You haven't quite got that far yet, but is it any rules that you have to kind of adhere to?
There are a set of policies that are in place, which some are mandatory, others aren't. But yes, the short answer is yes, there are.
Can you perhaps elaborate on what they are, or is that they?
It's mainly down to disclosure.
Okay.
Of information. That's the nub of the issue.
Okay. Okay. So is that a rule, or that is just a policy?
Well, it's a policy, some of which are mandatory. Now you could define that. You could define that as a rule.
Okay. Is it written down anywhere?
Yes, it is. Yes.
It is, right. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Is it in the rule book?
It's not in the rule book. No, it's a policy document that I was issued with when I became a member of the General Council. Okay.
So I assume I'm not going to press you too much on this because obviously it's a policy that it's a kind of not a secrecy policy, but it's a I don't know how you term it. It's
a policy document that sort of outlines the responsibilities of General Council members and or officials of the society. Okay. So it applies to the General Council members, the president, the chairman, the administrator, etc., etc.
Right. Okay. So so technically, if you were to just go around telling everybody everything that was discussed, is that some kind of does that make it a disciplinary offence then? Does it? It's just
I suppose at the end of the day it would do, yes.
Okay, fair enough. I suppose we need that in a way, much like the government, their executive has although we know with most governments there's leaks at cabinet level, but I suppose they do have a confidentiality, don't they, clause where they do try and kind of give an impression that they are a whole. So I can understand why that's there. But that's really interesting that that's it. Did you have to sign anything, or you just?
No, there was nothing to sign. It was just a document to look through.
Yeah, don't do this, right? Okay. So we talked about the Zoom meetings. I assume from what you said that you're going to restand in 2021 for the General Council. Now you've got a taste of it, and
that's my intention, John. Yes, it is. Yes.
Fantastic. And I must say, when I won't mention names, but what was really telling, because obviously I've got to know you a little bit better these last few months. But when we shared the kind of invite, the calendar invite for this interview this evening, it went on the Yorkshire Budgerigar Facebook page, and there was a couple of people who went on, and they didn't. Usually people say, "Oh, that's good. We're tuning. We're looking forward to it." Mm-hmm. But one chap came on and said, "Graham is such a nice man. This will be a brilliant interview." And
very kind.
I forget how else he worded it, but you're obviously really highly thought of within your area. How important is your area society to you? Has it always been, a big part of the fancy for you? I get that impression that it has been.
It has. I think all area societies are absolutely essential because, and I think they'll become more important as time goes by. If we cannot increase the membership to local societies, my fear is that some of those local societies will either merge together or disappear. And it could well be a situation where you've almost got only the area society left. Now that's a worst case scenario, and we've got to try and stop that from happening. But I believe the area society is vital to knit the whole area together and be a focal point for the whole area and for the clubs and the members in the area. And we've got to somehow make the area societies more relevant. Generally, the area societies are suffering from lack of membership. With the odd exception, most area societies struggle for members, and that can be seen in some of the area society shows. And I think the reason for that is that the area society could be seen that it doesn't really belong to the members. And what I mean by that is, if you're a member of a local club, you do everything you can to support that local club, both at meetings and at shows, to get the best benched entry and the best patronage that you can achieve at that show. Because there's so many shows together in a short period of time, if everybody's supporting the local shows, when it comes round to the area show, they think, oh, we've got a week off. Great. Because the patronage of the area show doesn't depend on benched entry, they think, well, I don't need to support it because it's not going to make a difference. And that's why I think some of the entries of the area society shows have suffered in the past. And I think we've somehow got to come up with a way of making the area societies more relevant and make members want to join the area society, as well as the local society. And that can be done in a variety of different ways, by perhaps having regular monthly meetings, for example. I know there's one area society in the northeast that has a monthly meeting with guest speakers every month. Now, I don't believe every area society does that. So in other words, it becomes almost like a local club. And people buy into that and they feel that they've got ownership in that. Yeah. The other thing I think is that when it comes to representation on the GC, I think we need to try and bring together the members of the area to appoint, by way of an election, the representative from the area that goes forward to the GC, because that then gives the members in that area direct contact with somebody on the GC who can express their views and opinions. Whereas at the moment, that does not necessarily have to happen. The area councillors live in the area that they're in, but they don't have to represent the views of the area members, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that was probably the setup originally, wasn't it? Going back in time.
Yes, going back in time, the area society representative represented the views of the members of the area. Now they don't have to. They can simply represent their own views. They just happen to be elected and live in the area that they were elected in. So I would like to see the area representatives truly elected by the members of the area. And that way it gives a reason to be a member of the area, because it means that you can then go to a councillor, whoever that happens to be, and put your views forward and expect him or her to represent those views at the council. So that's, I think we need to try and get the areas to be more representative of the membership.
And could you go so far as saying that every general councillor has got to sit on the executive of the area? Would that be kind of another policy that would be?
I think that's down to the area themselves. People might have a view that to be on the general council, you have to be on the council for the area. That may be the case, but it might not. That's down to the area to decide. They could either hold an election of people who wish to put the names forward, or they could take a view like you just mentioned and say, right, the people that are on the GC, sorry, the people that are on the area council, does anyone off there want to go forward to represent this area on the GC? So it could be done either way, but I think it will be down to the area to decide what's best for them.
Absolutely. And so on that basis, do you think, I mean, this seems to be the most topical question at the minute, or one of them. Do we do away with firstly, do we do away with the 2/3 majority rule for everything we do? Do we move to a first past the post system for rule changes and general decision making? Do you think?
I would like to see that. Yes, I would. I think
to a first past the post.
To a first past the post system. Yes.
Okay.
We cannot have a situation where just over 2/3 of the membership dictate rules to just under 2/3 of the membership. That's not democracy. The council is run on a democratic basis, first past the post, if you like. So on the majority decisions. So I don't see why it can't be applied to the membership.
And then, so taking that on another step, with the general council, obviously at the minute we've got people putting themselves forward to, you know, to obviously to work very hard for the GC, but perhaps we've got people who don't get on, who've got more votes than people who do get on. So the question is, do we do away with area representation, perhaps to get the best 14 people?
I would like to see both. I would like to see the 10 area representatives in the way I've just described.
Okay.
But I would also like the council to be increased to 16, another 2 members, basically to try and reflect a broader range of views and opinions. Mm-hmm. My preference would be to go to 20, but I think that might be too many at this stage. Yeah. But I would like to see another 2 appointed, and those extra 6 would be appointed first past the post.
Okay.
So it would appeal to people who want a first past the post system, and it would appeal to people who want the area representation. It would cover both options, and that way you get both options. You could well have 2 people from the same area, which is what we have in Yorkshire at the moment, but that doesn't really make any difference. But the reason I would like more GC members is just to try and express a broader range of views and opinions than currently we have. And as I say, in an ideal world, I would like to go to 20, 10 appointed by the area, 10 first past the post. But I don't think that will happen. But that's something I'd like to move towards over the next few years. But we'll have to wait and see if that does happen. Sure.
So with the general council, when you're on it, obviously you're responsible for a lot of decision making and sort of steering the hobby in one direction or another. Do you have to take on a particular specialist role as when you're on there? Do you have to join a subcommittee? Just out of interest.
No, you don't have to join a subcommittee. You can be invited to join a subcommittee. The subcommittees are currently all filled. Obviously, I've only joined the general council since May, and I'd be happy to fulfill any role that I'm asked to fulfill, as long as I feel I can make a contribution towards it. At the moment, there are a number of subcommittees, subgroups looking at a whole range of issues, and they will report back over a period of time. My own view is that I don't think we need subcommittees and subgroups anymore. It was different when the committee consisted of perhaps 40 GC members, but I believe that all decisions now should be taken by the General Council, particularly in light as we've now got Zoom meetings. If a situation crops up that needs to be discussed, we can simply call a quick Zoom meeting. Previously, in the past, it may have been difficult to get a large group of people together, hence the reason, I think, for the subgroups. But we now passed that, we've moved on, and I think I don't see a reason now for the subgroups. I think it can be done by discussion by the whole General Council.
Does that I mean, I'll be the first one to admit that I think sometimes the General Council are viewed with a kind of a slight air of suspicion, just because, you know, there aren't minutes, and perhaps they haven't been great at keeping people up to date and with their press releases. Obviously, I think through various discussion groups, people have got to know that there's the board that are these sort of 5 people that make decisions where you need a quick response, perhaps to an emergency situation or a kind of routine thing. But would you advocate removing the board and literally having the 14 or the 16, as you suggested, just decide on everything as it's more democratic? Is that what
yes, yes. Again, I don't think there's any reason for the board. I don't think there's any reason for it to exist whatsoever. Again, it can all be done by Zoom. The board is primarily there to primarily discuss emergency situations and disciplinary matters. But again, there's nothing to stop that now happening by the whole council by a Zoom meeting. The job of the board is to come back with recommendations. It doesn't mean to say that the council have to accept those recommendations, but the very fact that the board exists is an area of concern for a number of people. And I just don't think there's, now in today's communications, I don't think there's any need for it.
Okay. So we perhaps sometimes when we talk about the hobby, we can not yourself, but us as a group, as a whole, generally, perhaps we can be a bit down on it. What do you think? Just something a bit different this time. What do you think we're getting right as a hobby at this time? What are we doing well?
I think the hobby is structured generally in an ideal way. The 10 area societies and the General Council, I think it's the broad basis of it is set up correctly. I think the judges training scheme that the council set up is absolutely first class, and I think it's the envy of the world. Both Galib and latterly Trevor Tahij have done a fantastic job in developing the judges training scheme. I obviously went through the judges training scheme, so I can talk from a perspective of actually going through the process, and it was a first class process. It was very well organised, very professionally done, and it continues to be the case. And it's superb. And I would urge anybody that that wants to go through that process to go through it, because we need more judges. So as long as you meet the criteria, I would suggest, I would recommend anybody to go on it to become a judge. It does focus the mind in terms of looking at birds and faults, etc., etc. And it's a fantastic process to go through. Now it's only a 2-year period. It's obviously a year shorter than it was when I went through the process. And I think it's now 6 shows rather than 9 when I went through it. So it's a quicker process, but we've absolutely got that right. It's a superb process, and I think it's the envy of lots of societies throughout the world. It's a good thing. So that's certainly one thing that we've definitely got right.
Outstanding. I know when I interviewed Martin Halen the other month, I feel quite proud. I sat here and the hairs were standing up on my arm, but he spoke in really nice terms about our club show. So he was envious of what we've got. So I think sometimes I know perhaps as a society we can be a bit down on the club show, always focusing on how we can make it better. But it's still a good event, and people, and much like our administrator as well. I know that no one else, no other society's got a full-time administrator. Well, pretty much a full-time administrator. So
that's right. Yeah.
So we have got that. We are lucky, and I think it's that's why I wanted to get that question in this time, because sometimes just to stop and take stock and say, yeah, this is good. We are onto a good thing, and perhaps to recognise it.
We have to recognise that the society is run in a very professional manner, and has been for a number of years. And whilst everything is perhaps not perfect, and certainly there are things that could do with improving, I think the fundamental basis of the society is sound. But that doesn't mean to say that things can't be changed or tweaked or done in a different way or looked at in a different perspective. But I think we can be too critical of the society, but we have to look at the things that are good. The club show is a fantastic weekend. Again, there's lots of room for improvement on the club show. Things can be done differently and improved. Nothing's ever perfect, and I think if we get complacent about the way things are done, that's when things can go downhill. I think we need to constantly look at the way we're doing things, reevaluate it, and if things can be done better, well, let's do it. Let's make the Budgerigar Society of the UK the best society in the world. Let's have the best show, the best rings, the best show cages, the best organisation, and let's make it the envy of the world. And we need to do that.
Absolutely. So challenge certificates, just jumping completely different topic very quickly. This was another question we got sent in. Are challenge certificates, are they too many at shows, and are they too easy to win?
Short answer, yes.
Okay.
Short answer, yes. in my opinion, they've been devalued greatly now. They just don't have the same value that they had a few years ago. One exhibitor with 2 birds is not really a competition.
Right.
I would actually make them more difficult to win because I think there needs to be a sense of competition to win a CC. It needs to be an achievement, and at the moment, it's just a piece of paper, and it's some people just want to go out and win as many CCs as they possibly can, and I don't think that's right.
No, I actually agree, and also with bought-in birds being exhibited, do you think we should knock that on the head and say we're a hobby, you're owner-bred birds only? Would you go along with that, or do you think there's a place sometimes for people to, if they've got a cracking bird and they brought it into to be able to show it?
I'm a bit divided on this. I think for first-year beginners who want to show, then obviously the only birds they're going to be able to show are bought-in birds. So I do believe that they should be given the ability to show bought-in birds. Thereafter, I think you really should be showing your own owner-bred run birds. It's a bit of a difficult one, that I'm divided views on that, because at the same time, if somebody is fortunate enough to buy in a very, very good bird, then naturally they'll want to show it. But personally, I wouldn't get any satisfaction out of that. But each to their own. So I wouldn't necessarily stop it, but I would discourage it.
I always think about it from another exhibitor's point of view. You know, if someone's come in and they're a second-year beginner, say, or second-year novice, and they've bred their own birds, but they've come back a step because they haven't perhaps paired their initial stock. You know, they're different bloodlines. Is it fair on them? It's a difficult one, isn't it? I know,
it is, but I think initially the people that do that may have initial success, but that needs to be measured over perhaps a 2 or 3 year period. And the people that have done that may find they can't breed the quality bird that they want and disappear from the hobby. And again, it comes back down to patience and perseverance. So it's a bit of a difficult one, that.
Okay, so another kind of show related question. I'm going to say showcase dilemma, but it's not really a dilemma. It's well, I suppose you could. Some people would term it as that. Do we need a decent? I know there is a plastic option that you've got to paint that hasn't been everyone's sort of taste and appreciation. Do we need to find quickly now a solution to a plastic or Trespa, which seems to be the preferred material, to the show cage that doesn't need as much maintenance, that will basically last people forever, providing they don't drop them from too great a height? Do we need to work that one out?
I think it's absolutely essential that we find a good show cage. I think the wooden show cages have had the day. In terms of the dimensions of the cage, I think as long as it meets the internal dimensions, I don't think it matters the fact that the material on the sides of the cage is a millimetre thicker or larger or smaller. I think as long as the internal dimensions are the same, then I really don't care what the cage is made of, whether it's made of Trespa or plastic. As long as, because you can go to any show now and you can look along a rack of show cages and they can all vary to a certain degree. Some can be very light, some can be very heavy. The angle at the back or the top, the angle can be different. So we've already got a huge variation in the show cages that we currently see on the show bench. And again, I think it's about keeping people in the hobby. One of my pet hates is refurbishing show cages. I've gone from having 20 down to 8 because I'm not inclined to start painting and repairing show cages that get dropped and banged, etc., at the shows. And I think that applies to lots of different people. And if they can do it on the continent, then we can do it over here. So yes, the show cage to me is the number one thing we need to get sorted out as soon as possible. that would hopefully, depending on Brexit and the pandemic, we need to try and get people to the club show from Holland, on the continent generally, and they need to be able to bring their birds in their show cages. Currently, what's happened in the past is that people have been borrowing show cages from the UK. So that means that it stops exhibitors from the UK showing. So I'm not persuaded by the argument that the fact that one cage is 1 millimetre or 2 millimetres higher or lower than another cage is enough reason to stop it from happening. It needs to be sorted out. Well, it should have been sorted out years ago.
Well, the thing is, this is one criticism that I will air of the General Council, just from, just as being a rank and file member, is that it's something that clearly the members want in vast numbers. And generally, if you're, and this isn't aimed at you, of course, but just perhaps past members of the General Council who have done a brilliant job, but for me, it's listening to the membership and keeping your ear to the ground and listening to see what they want. And they want that Trespa show cage, pretty much, or something very similar. So I think that's what has caused some upset and consternation, is that hasn't been forthcoming. Are you able to kind of indicate whether the General Council have made? I'm not going to commit you to a firm answer, but are the General Council revisiting that, or is it, unless we get a rule change, is it a dead duck at the minute?
Well, it's got to be a rule change, because we're a rule-based society, so it's got to be a rule change. But I do believe there are moves. I mean, it could well be that this coming rule change year, there could be certainly one or two people who submit rule changes, and it could well be that the council may decide to submit something on their own behalf to do with that. But to be frank with you, the council could have done that over the last 2 years. So I share everybody's frustration that this hasn't moved on from 3 years ago almost. It could have been resolved a long time ago, but it hasn't been. But it needs to be resolved this time without fail, because if it's not, then I fear that people will just stop showing because of the quality of the show cages. As a judge, the last thing I want to see on the show bench, and it happens time and time again, because there's such pressure on the societies to achieve the number of birds benched to achieve patronage. I've had it myself. You get a phone call. We need another few birds. Can you show another few birds? So what happens is they get birds that aren't in condition, and they put them in cages that really shouldn't be there, that are tatty, that need painting, that need refurbishing, and they really shouldn't be there. And that's happening all the time. And the idea of the Trespa or the plastic cage, I personally prefer the Trespa cage to plastic. They can go in the dishwasher, they can be cleaned, they're hygienic, they're durable, they should last a lifetime. Both cages, both wooden, Trespa and plastic, could be run side by side, so there's not necessarily a cost to people who don't want to invest in that type of cage. But it needs to be resolved, and it needs to be resolved this next time without fail.
Well, I think but personally, just through discussions and just looking at forums, etc., I get the strong impression, and I'm doing it myself. I'm not buying any more show cages because I am waiting for the plastic ones. So I've got enough show cages, and I've got some spares in the loft if mine fall apart. So I'm not dropping my numbers off, but I do believe that a number of fanciers, it's my feeling that the number of usable show cages are going down, and people are not looking to buy them because they're waiting for the plastic cage. So and it's only harming show numbers, isn't it now? So
I agree totally with you, John. And in addition to that, I think the number of show cage manufacturers is reducing as well. So it's coming from both angles.
Absolutely.
So it's something that, for the sake of the hobby, it's absolutely imperative that this next rule change year, the show cage is resolved once and for all. It's been going on for, I think it's been going on for almost 10 years, this conversation, and it's just not moved forward. Last year, as you know, we had two proposals put forward, both of which failed. But this time, it's got to be sorted out.
Yeah, well, I think as well, it's how it's sold, isn't it? You're right about the General Council. I think really with some of these major rule changes, like the 2/3 rule, rather than lumping them all in with, say, 15 or 20 other rule changes, in one particular year, the GC should just have one rule and say, right, this year we're going to discuss the 2/3 rule, lots of debate in the magazine, lots of debate online, and then everyone has a vote on it. And then we say, right, that's us done for a few years now. And the next year is the showcase. Because I do think when we had the showcase vote last time, not only have we got the 2/3 rule to get passed, we had two options. And it's difficult to ask people the same question in 2 or 3 ways and get a proper answer out of them. I think sometimes it's like a yes or no, isn't it? And
yes, yeah, of course. I mean, as you know, the GC can put forward a rule change every year. So there's been at least 2 opportunities recently where that could have been addressed, but it hasn't been.
Well, I'm trying to stand, as you know, and that would be my thing, is that it is breaking these things down into their component parts, boiling them down and saying, for this year, this is what we're talking about, and we're going to focus on that. And then once it's done, much like the rings, the sigh of relief was almost palpable, wasn't it? When we got the rings we wanted. And everything you've said tonight, Graham, which has been really impressive, is that how you've said we've got to be professional, and we want to be world leading. And I think those 2 sentences say everything about you, and your approach, but also how we've got to be, haven't we? If we're that way and we become really the envy of the world, then I don't think we'll fail in kind of growing our hobby. So
no, I think we need a short, medium, and long-term plan, and the short-term plan certainly would include the show cage, and we need to look at that and get that resolved, and then move on to the next issue, of which there are a number of issues that will crop up over the next few years, but sure. they need to be addressed.
Absolutely. So we talked just very quickly, just moving away from all that political palaver. So tap water or filtered water?
Oh, tap water every time.
Council pop, as my friend Kevin calls it.
Council pop, yes.
Council pop. Yeah. So you talked about putting iodine in the water. Is there any other supplements that go in the water, or is it just purely iodine? You're not.
No, it's iodine, but it's in very, very small doses. And the one I use, which I didn't realize at the time when I bought it, also contains sodium benzoate.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So it's covering 2 bases, and it's only 2 drops per liter, so it's very, very tiny amounts. So I use that every day of the week, fresh water every day, and that's done to get that every day of the week. And then 2 days a month they will get a multivitamin Oasis made by Fraser's.
Okay.
Other than that's it, unless I'm treating them for anything. But that's the water. That's all they get.
Okay, but you're not obsessing about trying to put calcium in your birds like I am at the minute. Does that come in the Fraser's product? Does it?
Well, that comes. I do sprinkle calcium on the seed occasionally, but
okay,
it doesn't go in the water. It goes on the seed because I don't like personally putting too many things in the water because I don't want the birds to stop drinking, particularly, and they can be very susceptible to water change. So particularly when they're breeding, you want as much water intake for the chicks as absolutely possible. And my fear is that if they stop, if you keep putting multivitamins in and this and that and all the rest of it, the water changes and they can go days and days without water. And that's the last thing you want, is you want the birds to be dehydrated. So most of the vitamins and additives I use would be put on the seed.
So another question from this one's for the Exhibition Budgie Girl Forum, one of their members. How do you see the hobby recovering from the pandemic, and what do you think we should all be doing to work on help us recover from it? Is there anything?
Well, it's very difficult because it's very difficult to plan because we just don't know what's going to happen. We've got shows planned, the young stock shows planned for May and June of next year. We've got the AGM planned for May of next year. We honestly don't know whether or not they're going to be able to take place. we just don't know, because as we've seen this last week or so, things can change dramatically. However, if things do improve and there's a vaccine and we can get regular testing and members are comfortable, because that's the other thing. We have got quite an elderly range of membership, and I include myself in that, who may feel uncomfortable in large groups, even with all the precautions that may be in place. So I think it's going to be a difficult thing, but we've got to try and encourage the meetings to start again in a safe way, and we've got to try and encourage the shows to start again in the right way, because that's fundamental to the hobby. Without that, if we have another year without shows and meetings, I do fear that a few people may decide to leave the hobby because they've just got out of the way of doing it. And but a lot of it is out of our control. We just have to wait and try and find out what's going to happen, and then do our best to try and reinvigorate the hobby at the appropriate time.
So thanks for that. Just some other just short general advice questions, which and I'm always for someone with your experience, I think our kind of newer members would really appreciate your answers to. So what advice would you give to someone ahead of their first show? Is there anything, any real nuggets that you would you sort of pass on to them of knowledge?
I assume you're talking about taking birds to exhibit at the show, are you, or just visiting? Yeah. Yeah, just taking birds. Well, first of all, before anybody, a beginner, goes to a show, I would hope that they've been to shows previously, just to look round and try and find out what's happening, and get a feel for the way that the show's been organised and run, and preferably with a mentor, or certainly with a member of their local club. So I think the first thing that they need to do is join a local club. That's paramount, because they will then be in a position where they can be explained to about the procedures and the way that the shows actually work, and as importantly, how to prepare the birds for the show. So in other words, the spotting, the show cage preparation, and everything else. So it's fundamental that they join a local club or mentor with an exhibitor in their area before they take a bird to the show. And I would go with no expectations whatsoever. I think they've got to simply go for the experience of showing the birds. That's got to be the number one priority, is get to the show, look at the birds that are winning, try and compare your birds with what's winning, and work out how you need to improve your own birds. And that's the advice that I would give them.
Excellent. And just changing subject again, jumping over to something completely different. How do you go about sourcing and choosing an outcross?
Right, that's a very good question.
I suppose it depends what you need at any one time, doesn't it?
It is. It depends on what features I'm looking to introduce into the stud, and I would look for a stud that excelled in those features. So if I wanted, for example, the recent outcrosses I bought in about 18 months ago were to improve the lutinos. So I was looking for birds that would improve the feather quality and the frame of the bird. So when I was looking for those birds, I went to a stud that I knew had birds that excelled in those features. And I bought two birds and paired them up. One bird has done very well. The other one hasn't yet filled an egg, but that's how it goes. Mm-hmm. But the lutinos that have been produced are of the quality that I was trying to achieve. And so if you're looking for a bird that perhaps you're lacking in spots, I think when you go looking for an outcross, you've got to go and try and look for features. You'll be extremely lucky if you can buy a bird with all the features on that you want, because they won't be available. So you've got to go and find features, whether it be depth of mask, size of spot, back skull, feather quality, whatever the feature is that you're looking for. Find a stud that excels in those features and approach that fancier and try and get some birds from that stud. That's the way I would approach it.
And how many outcrosses do you buy in each year? It sounds like you don't buy many.
To be honest, it depends, John, from year to year. This last year, I think I've brought in probably 3 or 4 birds. Another year, I may not bring any in. It really just does depend on. I won't simply go and buy birds just for the sake of it. It's a different story if somebody decides to loan me a bird, which I do with a number of fanciers. We do swap birds around, and I would urge everybody to consider doing that because it helps everybody without having to spend a fortune on birds. So if you can establish relationships with a number of people and you can swap birds around, then that's got to be the ideal way of doing it because everybody benefits. And you retain that gene pool on a local basis. So if you need to go back for an outcross, you can go and get one quite easily. So if somebody was prepared to loan me a bird, then we will come to arrangement and swap the chicks. So if they breed 4, I'll keep 2 and they get 2 back. And I think that's a way forward without having to spend an absolute fortune to get the type of birds that you're after.
Absolutely. And when you get if you're you're fortunate enough, you get something really brilliant in and you think, wow, this is really going to take me forward. How do you generally use the bird? It's amazing. Some fanciers will use it once and then get rid of it. Others will just put it across as many birds as they can. I suppose it kind of depends what it throws out. But how do you generally use an outcross? Are you sparingly or?
If I'm going to get an outcross in, it will generally be a cockbird. It will very rarely be a hen because I prefer to breed and use my own hens. I will put a cockbird with as many hens as I can possibly put it to over the years and spread that gene pool throughout the shed. I won't use it once and then get rid because I just don't see the point in that. You've bought that bird in for a specific reason. You've bought that bird in for its genes. So it makes sense to spread that gene pool throughout the shed as far as you possibly can. Because if that bird were to die, you don't have to go and buy another outcross to get those genes. You've got it back in your shed.
You just make one.
So put it to as many hens as you can possibly get it to.
Excellent. Brilliant. So we talked about red mite. What about medicines in your treatment box? Is there any sort of super ones in there that you use? Obviously, I know you talked about the iodine and the sodium benzoate products for Megabac. Is there anything else you keep in your box?
Yeah. There's a fair few. Baytril is the #1 go-to medicine. I only use that on birds that I can see are physically ill. So they may have diarrhea or they may have enteritis or something, or they may pick something up. So they will be treated individually for generally a week to 10 days, which normally cures that type of thing. On a regular basis, I treat them with Ronivet S every 3 months for trichomosis. And I treat the whole stud, whether they're breeding or not, because you can use it with chicks in the nest. Twice a year, I will use a product called Parastop, which is a treatment for E. coli and Salmonella. And that flushes everything out throughout the course of the stud. Again, I can use that while the birds are breeding, even with day-old chicks. So it's not a problem. As long as you use it at the recommended dose. And a week after, for the week after they've had that treatment, they go into a course of Prolite C, which is a pro and prebiotic, and then they go back onto the normal regime of water. And they're the main ones that I use throughout the course of the stud. I used to use I can't think what it's called now. It's from Vetafarm for Megabac S.
Okay.
But it's just horrendously expensive, and that's why I was quite pleased when I found this product called with the iodine that had sodium benzoate in, because that's possibly useful. It's too early to tell yet, but at least it's something that we do know does work against Megabac, and it's something that I've not really suffered from, thankfully. So it's not a major problem.
Good. Long may that continue.
Absolutely.
And just very quickly, Avery detergents and disinfectants. Have you got a favourite?
F10.
F10, yeah.
F10 is the main one I use, but I use products made by Sterizar. They make fogging products, but they also make some very good hard surface and floor cleaning products that are antibacterial. They're used actually within the NHS, and they're superb products. But my go-to product is F10.
Fantastic. Right. Here's a good one for you. If it was down to you solely, would you take the club show on the road?
Again, I've got mixed views on that. One part of me says yes. Let's get it around the country. Let's get people from different areas to the club show. There's obviously some practical issues involved in doing that. It would have to probably be run by each area. So it's something I've thought about in the past. Would each area be prepared to hold the club show and run it in their own area? There's obviously logistical issues to be overcome. I don't think there's anything that couldn't be overcome. It's very much down to, I think, the fact, would the area be prepared to host it? So that's on one side of the coin. So yeah, it's not a no, but it's something that could be looked at. My preferred option is to make it a destination venue. In other words, a venue where the whole family could go for the weekend, and to a touristy area. For example, somewhere like York. And the only reason I mention York is because I know it. It's a tourist destination. It's got a lot of history. It's got lots of things for people to do, both in and around York, the York area. And this applies to other places as well, but I'll just use York as an example. And I would like wherever it is to become the focal point of that show, so that the show has its own identity, a bit like Karlsruhe or Kassel. People know that location and it's got its own identity. I suppose to a certain extent, so does Doncaster. But I just feel that Doncaster has gone past its sell-by date and it needs to be reinvigorated. And I think it needs a more upmarket venue, to be quite frank, particularly in light of the fact that they've made the alterations outside now.
Yes.
It was always difficult to get to and from the venue with the cages. This year, I found it to be a nightmare, getting cages to and from the car park because of the distance involved. And it just seemed to be further away. And I think the club show could do with reinvigorating and just moving on a little bit. And I think a destination venue would help that. It would get the whole family there. The family could come and spend the whole weekend there. There's plenty of touristy things for the family to do while the exhibitor is at the show. And it could become just a regular venue that could be used time and time again. It certainly, I think, needs to be bigger, needs to be larger. We need more trade stands. And we need to make it a bit more of a special event. And we need to make it it's classed as a world show. It's not, but we need to encourage visitors from certainly from the near continent across and open it up as much as possible. We need to do everything we can to make it the best show that we possibly can.
I get logistically that, you know, we've got all the stage in there, and it is a convenient. There's a lot of pluses to having it at the Dome. What about one idea that I like that I've had is that obviously we're 100 in five years so time. Do we look perhaps as a one-off? And I agree with you that we need to just give it a little nudge on and reinvigorate it a bit. As a special one-off, do we look to go back to the posh race course just for the centenary? You know, would that do it? Because you know it's only up the road and it looks pretty good in there these days, I must say.
Absolutely, the Doncaster racecourse would be another venue that we could look at. I did look at York Racecourse as a potential venue, which would, and there are, don't get me wrong, there are lots of other venues that could be used as well. But I think perhaps we need to invest more money in it. there's the old saying, if you build it, people will come. And initially, we might need to spend a fair amount of money to get it to the level that we wish. But we need to get people to the show, and it needs, but there needs to be a reason for people to go. And it's not just to look at the birds, it's to go to the trade stands, it's to go to seminars, it's to go to lectures, etc., etc. We could probably look at increasing the number of lectures that are available on both days, not just on the one day, and make it more of an event than perhaps it currently is. But certainly, I have no reservation in transferring it around the country if we can get the logistics sorted out and the people in particular areas are prepared to host the show and do the work, because that's the other problem. It's actually getting people to spend the time to transfer the staging and get the show set up. If we can get that sorted, then absolutely, let's move it around the country. Let's give it a try. I would never rule anything out, because we've got to give different things a go and see what works. If it doesn't work, try something different.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Here's something completely different. How concerned should new breeders be about tailless wonders and flightless birds, which for me are the real scourge of the hobby at the minute? You know, do you?
Certainly, I think as far as beginners, novices are concerned, they should keep away from them. It's a very difficult thing, because I've bred from birds that don't have tails, don't have, well, in some cases that don't have flights, and it's not been passed on. And I've bred from birds that are complete and ended up with birds with no tails. So I wouldn't not use a bird just because it has not got a tail. And in fact, I've got a pair paired up at the moment. Neither of them have got a tail.
Okay.
But the family history is okay. If the family history was one where they had no tails at all, then I wouldn't use them. But I would not use a bird just because it has not got a tail.
So you're strict with it, but not to the degree that they're out completely.
No, if it's got elsewhere the right features, the right head, the rest of it's good, but it just happens not to have a tail, then I would use it.
Okay, thank you. Here's a good one for you. We always say to people, what have you done right? And feel free not to answer this, but have there been any disasters or things you've done in error that you've really learned from, where you think, oh, crumbs, I can't believe I did that or that happened, and it happened because of this? Is there anything like that? Again, a real learning curve that you could share with us, please?
There's only one, and I regret it to this day. When I clean the flights out, I normally vacuum them out, and the vacuum head I took apart and stood the vacuum pole with the cleaning head up vertically, and it slipped and fell down and fell on a really, really good bird.
Oh no.
And I was absolutely distraught with myself, and it took me almost a month to get over it. I was absolutely disgusted with what I did, and it was a complete accident. But I'll tell you what, I've learned from it, and it'll never ever happen again. Touch wood, that's the only disaster I've ever had. Touch wood, quick.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. But I always think you need to scan as you're doing stuff in a bird room, just to try and foresee what the ramifications of stuff you're doing are.
Absolutely.
Those birds are pretty hardy, but they can disappear, can't they? Fall off their mortal coil quite quickly. If you're not careful.
Absolutely.
And it is pig sickening, is it, when it's your own silly fault as well?
I felt sick. I felt sick to my stomach because we've got a responsibility to look after the birds the best that we can. And when you do something that is avoidable, it got to me. It really did get to me.
Okay, so again, just jumping back onto some of the general counsel bits. And my position is we do need them, which is why I've proposed a rule change, more for the benefit of the general counsel. at the minute we just kind of have a summary of what goes on at general council level in the BS magazine. Do we need for the protection of the general council, so people are aware of what they're doing and to kind of bust myth and rumour going around the hobby, do we need minutes of the general council meeting and perhaps, well, at the very least, the general council meetings that members can sort of see so they can understand what's being discussed and generally the direction that the hobby's being taken in? And plus, so they know what their locally, what their councillor for their area, which way they're voting on subjects. Do you think we need that?
Yes, I personally have no objection to the full minutes of any council meetings being published. And the voting patterns. I'm quite happy for people to know which way I vote, and if I'm challenged on the way I vote, then I'll explain to the best way that I can the reason that I voted in that particular way. And it won't please everybody, but I don't think you can ever do that. You'll always vote in a certain way that perhaps somebody objects to. But I think if you explain your reasons why you voted that way, and you're honest about that, then people will understand and accept that. So I am all in favour of the full minutes being published and the voting patterns of the General Council. I think the place for that is probably on the website rather than in the magazine because of the size of some of the minutes that could be available. But I think they could be made available on request, a written copy available on request for people that don't have access to the internet. But certainly I do believe that, particularly in light of the new website, when that becomes available, there will be a members area where you can log in securely. I do believe they should be available for people to have a look at. Yes, I do.
Excellent. And also I get the impression there's going to be more councillors or more prospective candidates trying to get onto the GC this time. The 150 words in the BS magazine doesn't seem a lot to me for people to be able to kind of sell themselves in terms of skills, abilities, and the commitments that they want to make on behalf of other fanciers. Is 150 words in the BS magazine enough for anybody, particularly new people that perhaps aren't that well known?
No, I don't think it is, John, to be honest. I think it needs to be dramatically improved in terms of the numbers of words that you can put down. I struggled when I first did my 150 words. I struggled to get everything in that I wanted to get across. And I think for perhaps prospective members who, shall we say, perhaps aren't really well known in the hobby, they need that space to be able to get their message across. So I'm all in favour of increasing the number of words. Quite frankly, to as many as a candidate feels is necessary to get their message across. I wouldn't put a limit on it at all, within reason. But I think it needs to be vastly improved over 150 because it's just not enough.
It's not enough, is it? No, I completely agree. Here was one, and I've got the. I mean, I'm conscious I've had you for two and a bit hours. Time flies, doesn't it? Crikey. So here's one. Again, slightly political, but this one came from someone on the EBF. Do you think there may be a case of bringing in a maximum term of office on the General Council, for example, 5 years, and then for those people to have a break, say, for a couple of years before they can stand again, just so that we get new council members with new ideas on a more regular basis? What do you think about that? Is that something that perhaps is worth considering, or?
I'm not sure about the council members being restricted in terms of how many years they can serve. I am perhaps in favour of restricting the chairman to the number of years that the chairman can serve as the chairman. Because I think after a period of time, with the best will in the world, people can run out of steam. And I think as the figurehead of the General Council, that person needs to be driving the hobby forward and coming up with new ideas and have a strategic plan as to where the hobby needs to go. And I think perhaps after a period of time, the enthusiasm and the passion can perhaps wane to a certain extent. So I don't think it should apply to the council members, but I do believe it should apply to the chairman to have perhaps no more than 2 terms, because that would allow then a prospective new chairman to be appointed who, as I say, would have new ideas, a new vision, a new direction, perhaps that he might want to talk to the council about taking. So I think a term restriction for the chairman is more appropriate.
Well, Graham, as I say, I've been firing questions at you for just over 2 hours. It's been thoroughly enjoyable. I'm so grateful. We're all so grateful for you giving your time over to us on all sorts of topics. Personally, I can tell that you're going to make a brilliant councillor for us, and I'm confident and that you'll be back on the general council. Obviously, leading the direction of the fancy for the next 3 years and beyond. So, and again, thank you for your time tonight and all the effort you put into the hobby. Yeah, thank you very much indeed.
And thank you, John, and thank you to all your members for the questions. And yes, I'll do what I can to move the hobby forward as much as I possibly can. And I hope to get back onto the council next time, but that's the members' decision. All I can do is put my views forward and hope that the members agree. And thank you very much for your time this evening.
Brilliant. No, thank you, Graham, and take care.
Thank you, John.
Cheers.
Good night.
Good night.